He's a predator, a prowler, and a pest. Today, we're going to look at the life, campaigns, and most importantly, the medals of Richard Sharpe's arch-nemesis, the sadistic sergeant Obadiah Hakeswill. In this video, I'll be going through Obadiah Hakeswill's backstory, while also showing some footage and history of Badajoz in Spain, which I was lucky enough to visit recently. As fans of Sharpe will know, during the Peninsular War, it's outside the walls of the fortress city of Badajoz that, in Sharpe's company, Obadiah and Richard Sharpe resume their long-running feud. One that had been simmering in the background since they both served in India roughly a decade earlier. So, just exactly who is Obadiah Hakeswill? Described as being aged in his 40s in 1812, Obadiah was likely born in Yorkshire in the late 1760s and grew up in the Dales, raised by his mother, Biddy. A wrong 'un from an early age, he was arrested whilst attempting to assault a parson's daughter, threatening her with an adder unless he got his wicked way. Saved by the girl's father, Obadiah was convicted of sheep theft, a charge used to protect the victim's reputation, and he was sentenced to death by hanging. On the day of the execution, Obadiah was hanged alongside several other men. He should have died, but a sudden rainstorm scattered the crowd. Among those present was his uncle, who cut him down from the gallows, out of duty to his sister, rather than any mercy, as he didn't like Obadiah either. I mean, who would? His uncle then urged Obadiah to flee. The young Obadiah, aged about 12, survived, but the noose caused him permanent damage. The rope scarred his neck, and for the rest of his life, he would be left with a severe facial tic. As a result of this close encounter with death, Hakeswill was convinced that he was unkillable and protected by the spirit of his mother Biddy. He extended this reverence to mothers in general, stating mothers were sacred. In later years, he would even speak to his dead mother through his shako or hat, treating it as a conduit to her spirit. Fleeing from the gallows and desperate for survival, Obadiah enlisted in the 33rd Regiment of Foot as a drummer boy. The 33rd was a local infantry regiment that recruited heavily from West Riding and the surrounding parts of Yorkshire. Over the years, Obadiah would rise to the rank of sergeant due to a combination of brown-nosing officers, dedication to drill, and paying scrupulous attention to military duties when he was under observation. When away from an officer's beady eye, Hakeswill would palm off menial tasks to lower ranks. By the 1790s, he was serving as a recruiting sergeant for the regiment, prowling the taverns of Sheffield. It's here that he meets a young Richard Sharpe and manipulates him into taking the king's shilling and joining the army to avoid arrest. As a private, Sharpe stood up to Obadiah's bullying, and the pair quickly developed an ongoing beef. In subsequent campaigns in Flanders and India, Hakeswill continued to torment Sharpe. In 1799, he conspired with Captain Morris to have Sharpe flogged to death in Sharpe's Tiger, although Sharpe survived the punishment, receiving only just over 200 of the intended 2,000 lashes after an intervention by Sir Arthur Wellesley. Over the next few years in India, Hakeswill would maintain a relentless vendetta against Sharpe. He would betray him to Tipu Sultan, fabricate a second assault charge against Sharpe, and then kill Sharpe's friend and mentor, Hector McCandless. Obadiah also kidnaps Sharpe and sells him to a corrupt merchant before deserting to join turncoat William Dodd in Sharpe's fortress. Obadiah somehow manages to lie and worm his way back into British service, and then the two, Sharpe and Obadiah's, military careers diverge for a time. Then, Obadiah possibly serves in the Fever Islands, where he contracts yellow fever, leaving his skin permanently stained yellow, matching his teeth. When it came to soldiers serving underneath him, Obadiah would terrorise the lower ranks, attempting to sow division and fear amongst his men. He would subject men to beatings until they offered up money or their wives in return for better treatment. One of this wretched redcoat's favourite tricks was to plant stolen officers' valuables in the belongings of soldiers that he held a grudge against, falsely framing them for theft. Victims included Richard Sharpe and Patrick Harper. Rumour has it that during one kit inspection, the sneaky sergeant even managed to set up the legendary content creator Chris Parkinson from Redcoat History.
Right, what we got here then? What the? Hakeswil!
Reducing the OG and Iron Duke of British military history to a quivering wreck after a severe flogging. When he's not shooting officers in the back or indulging in other forms of blue on blue, Obadiah spends his spare time either muttering to his deceased mother, stealing valuables, or terrorising his troops. He re-enters Sharpe's life in early 1812 in the novel Sharpe's Company, appearing as a sergeant in a new draft sent to the South Essex Regiment, preparing for the Siege of Badajoz. By this point, Sharpe has temporarily risen to the rank of captain and commands the light company until replaced by Captain Rymer. Soon after their initial meeting, whilst lurking in a stable, no doubt counting stolen coins, Obadiah spots Teresa Moreno, Sharpe's wife. He attempts to intimidate her into submitting to him, but badly misjudges his victim. She resists fiercely, and the seedy sergeant is quickly driven off when Harper and Sharpe arrive, just in time to give him a cheeky headbutt and a kick in the googlies. Humiliated, and with the Siege of Badajoz looming in the background, Obadiah wastes no time in reviving his long-running vendetta against Sharpe. He conspires to have Harper flogged and demoted, and engineers the disarming of Sharpe's remaining riflemen. He also continues to fixate on Sharpe's wife, who is now inside the walls of Badajoz, which is cut off by the British. Even though he loved to quote from the scriptures, Obadiah was a man so despised, even animals couldn't stand him. Look at that poor donkey. Obadiah's idea of hygiene was to wash his feet at least once every 6 months, coupled with beastly bad breath that could knock out an elephant. The Siege of Badajoz occurred during March and April 1812 and was a major event in the Peninsular War during the Napoleonic period. Badajoz was an important strategic location because it sat on the border between Spain and Portugal and controlled key arterial routes and river crossings along the Guadiana River. Whoever held the city could move armies and supplies between the two countries and threaten invasion into Portugal. For Wellington, capturing Badajoz was essential to protect Portugal and secure his army's supply lines before advancing further into Spain. The siege lasted from the 16th of March until the 6th of April. After surrounding the city, Wellington's British and Portuguese army carried out a siege using artillery to bombard the walls and create breaches. The British attacks focused primarily on the east and south of the city, which you can see here from this view, looking out east from the walls of Badajoz Castle. You can just see how exposed the attackers would have been to cannon and musket fire as they approached the walls. The two main breaches opened by the artillery were known as the Trinidad Breach and the Santa Maria Breach, and these became the focus of the assault by the 4th and Light Divisions. A diversionary attack would also occur in the northwest of the city by the St. Vincent Bastion. The Trinidad Bastion today is fairly well preserved, although a road now runs through the main gate. Here is the vicinity of Trinidad Gate, where nearby the breach was blown open by the British artillery. You can still see the thick walls, bastions, and the angular layout that show why Badajoz was such a formidable fortress and tough nut to crack. So here's where the French soldiers would have poured volley after volley of musketry fire and other nasty bits onto the British soldiers down below. Although the British had to contend with mines, devastating fire and chevaux de frise, filming this, I had to contend with lots of scattered dog poo, which bizarrely seemed to concentrate in this particular corner of Badajoz. There may not be mines underneath the fortifications, but nowadays watch out for the massive dog poop which is lying around and not picked up. So yeah, watch where you step, otherwise you might have an unpleasant surprise around the Trinidad Bastion. Seemingly, Trinidad Bastion is a poop and scoop free zone. The walls still show pitting and scarring from the cannonade and musket fire. Going back to the siege, once the breaches were considered large enough, Wellington ordered a major assault on the night of the 6th of April. As we mentioned, the main attacks were directed at the Trinidad and Santa Maria breaches, whilst diversionary attacks were launched elsewhere to distract the French defenders. At Trinidad, British assault columns were ordered forward, advancing across the ditch and up the broken slope of rubble toward the opening. The breach was defended by the French, who had turned it into a kill zone. Guns were positioned to fire directly into the gap, and obstacles such as debris and chevaux de frise slowed the attackers' advance. As the troops crowded into the breach, the French poured down musket fire and artillery, forcing repeated assaults back down the slope. Confusion, darkness and smoke made coordination difficult, and officers were often killed or wounded while trying to rally their men. Despite heavy losses, fresh troops continued to be sent forward in determined attempts to force an entry, as Wellington was impatient. Imagine advancing through the darkness toward the breach, climbing over shattered stone while shot and fire tore through the crowded mass around you, with the air choked by smoke and screams and no way to retreat. Must have been terrifying. Whilst the main assaults at Trinidad and Santa Maria breaches stalled under intense resistance, other Allied attacks elsewhere in the fortress eventually succeeded. In Sharpe, the South Essex, including Obadiah, took part in the 3rd Division's diversionary attack, which targeted the high walls of the castle using ladders or escalades. Whilst the main Allied assaults were focused on Trinidad and Santa Maria, Picton led the 3rd Division against the castle wall, a sector the French believed to be less vulnerable. Using ladders, Picton's men escaladed the walls under fire in darkness and confusion. So you can imagine Obadiah lurking under the corpses of the soldiers, trying to assault the walls behind me, rifling through pockets trying to get coins, and generally hiding from the action. Despite heavy resistance and the difficulty of climbing the high defences, the division managed to gain the top of the walls and force its way inside. Once they had secured the castle, they broke into the town from within. This success outflanked the French defenders holding the breaches and made further resistance impossible. Picton's attack on the castle was therefore crucial, and thus, whilst the breach assault stalled with severe losses, the capture of the castle ensured the fall of Badajoz. With the initial attackers, including Sharpe, focusing on securing the castle, no doubt Obadiah would have picked his moment and rushed up those ladders like a rat up a drain pipe, relishing the chaos to come. Breaking into Badajoz and perhaps stopping for a cheeky kebab, Obadiah, along with hordes of British and Portuguese soldiers, would have begun rampaging amongst these confined streets, adding chaos to the fortress's ancient twisting alleys. The old streets of Badajoz are still narrow, winding and uneven, shaped by centuries of defence than by planning. It's still difficult for cars to drive through the old town today, and you really get a sense of the atmosphere of that time. Desperate to reach Sharpe's wife to have his wicked way, Obadiah may have stopped off at this church to loot some silverware and maybe ravish a nun or two. With his dastardly deeds complete, Obadiah would then be on his way. Once he arrived at Sharpe's wife's house, his depraved plan to diddle to death Teresa once again fails. Thwarted by Sharpe and Harper, Obadiah vanishes into the chaos of the Badajoz night, slipping away amid the confusion, smoke and violence. British and Portuguese troops rampaged through the city for roughly 3 days. During this time, there was widespread looting, drunkenness, and violence. A number of binge-drinking British soldiers reportedly fell into vats of drink and were drowned. Finally, on the Duke of Wellington's orders, a gallows was erected in the city centre, and several British soldiers were hung from there. Order was then gradually restored in the British and Portuguese regiments. If Obadiah was around today, no doubt in between reading the scriptures and drill pamphlets, he would keep a copy of Clasps of Courage close to hand, possibly nestled alongside a portrait of his mother in his shako. You too can get your copy today and support the channel as well as learn about long-lost campaigns in British India. An Amazon link is in the channel description. In the months that follow Badajoz, Hakeswil resurfaces far from the battlefield, having gathered around him a ragtag gaggle of deserters. From the mountains, he emerges as a self-appointed leader, along with a French cook, rampaging around the countryside, causing havoc. Whilst in the mountains, he stumbled upon the beautiful Lady Farthingale, aka Liz Hurley, praying at a shrine for a child. Thinking of himself as a somewhat virile lover, offering Lady Farthingale a full-blown belly by sundown, Obadiah, in his own words, needs his scratchings. And when Obadiah is up, he's up like an animal. When Sharpe assaults Hakeswil's mountain stronghold, the deranged deserter slips away, and then shoots and kills Sharpe's wife when she tries to stop him from escaping. When he's finally captured, the scumbag sergeant was finished off by a firing squad. In terms of medals and decorations, Obadiah's dubious bravery or exploits on the battlefield, coupled with desertion, would make pinning down medals hard. Had he been alive by the 1840s and with his crimes whitewashed, he may have been entitled to a Military General Service Medal with Badajoz clasp, and also, later, an Army of India medal for his earlier service in India, with possibly Asigur and Asai clasps. Interestingly, he also shows on his uniform in Sharpe's enemy what seems to be a stolen or looted French Legion of Honour. He may also have received a Sarangapatan medal from the Honourable East India Company, although that's very much a stretch. Clearly I've just touched the surface here on Obadiah and the Siege of Badajoz, but if you do want to learn more about this period of history, which I'm a little bit blurry on, I definitely recommend going over to the Redcoat History channel and checking out their series. I think Chris Parkinson and Marcus Cribb did on the Peninsular War. It's really good. If you enjoyed this, please check out my video on Slippery French Spy, Major Pierre Ducos. It should pop up about now. Strangely, when I first posted it, I think no one watched it, so it's got very low views. But if you've got a spare 10 minutes or so, I would appreciate it. Thanks for watching. I hope you found some value from this, and I'll see you in the next one.